You didn't hear the first conversation, but it happened. A quiet meeting somewhere above the 70th floor, tinted glass reflecting a skyline that doesn't sleep. Someone said your name, not in passing, not as gossip, as a case, a phenomenon, a problem wrapped in fascination. They leaned forward, lowered their voices, and asked the only question that ever truly matters in those circles. Who is this person, and how are they moving like that without us noticing? That's where it started. One mention, one ripple. Then came the calls, the private exchanges, the untraceable emails marked urgent from accounts that don't exist after sunrise. The inquiry wasn't small. It spread through rooms where numbers decide destinies, where markets bend around whispers. You became the whisper. They sent people, analysts, energy readers, behavioral psychologists, ex-agents turned consultants, each assigned a different angle: body language, public footprint, digital silence, economic anomalies linked to your timing. They charted every post, every pause, every movement. And what confused them most wasn't what they found, it's what they didn't. No public bragging, no predictable pattern, no craving for validation, just a steady pulse of advancement, measured, silent, unstoppable, the kind that forces attention without asking for it. They called it the field, a presence that can't be traced but can be felt. You see, they track everything: markets, minds, momentum. But when your name started syncing with unpredictable spikes, stock surges, cultural shifts, random upticks in innovation metrics, they couldn't explain it. The data didn't lie, but it didn't make sense either. So they built a task force, gave it a name: Project Halo. The brief was simple: determine whether this individual is influence or incident. And that's where the fascination began mutating into obsession. They started with observation. Private footage compiled from hundreds of sources. You walking into rooms that suddenly changed atmosphere. You saying one sentence that altered entire meeting outcomes. No dramatic gestures, just energy, potent, contained, calibrated. The kind that makes people straighten their backs without realizing why. The more they watched, the more patterns emerged. People around you started performing better. Dead projects revived. Investors shifted interest overnight. Teams under you outperformed predictive models by impossible margins. They didn't call it charisma anymore. They called it an interference field. One analyst described you in her report as the human algorithm of focus. She said your presence compresses noise into signal. Another wrote that your body emits behavioral gravity, that proximity to you alters ambition thresholds. These are men and women paid to measure influence scientifically, yet their language drifted from analytics into awe. And still they weren't satisfied. Billionaires don't like mysteries that aren't theirs, so they pushed deeper. The second phase involved interviews. They reached out to everyone who ever worked near you. Old colleagues, professors, even rivals who tried to outshine you. The interviews began routinely, but something unusual kept happening. The moment your name was spoken, the atmosphere changed. Some smiled unconsciously, some stiffened. A few teared up without understanding why. The interviewers noted physiological reactions, heart rates spiking, pupils dilating, micro-expressions fluctuating between respect and unease. They called it resonance feedback. One venture capitalist confessed that after a single lunch with you, he couldn't stop reorganizing his entire portfolio. He said your conviction infected him like electricity. Another, a luxury brand founder, claimed your advice made her scrap an entire campaign overnight and relaunch with authenticity as the core strategy, and it worked. These are people who don't take guidance easily, yet each admitted your perspective felt non-negotiable, as if they were hearing truth distilled into instruction. The transcripts reveal the same phrase repeated in different languages. They're operating beyond leverage, meaning you don't play the game, you tilt the board. That terrified them, because control only exists when outcomes are predictable, and you became the variable they can't simulate. By the third week, the reports started carrying contradictions. One section described you as grounded, humble, inaccessible to manipulation. Another described you as a walking disruption, someone who could make markets stutter just by exiting a room. The contradictions didn't cancel each other. They merged into a profile that defied linear measurement. You weren't competing. You were vibrating on a frequency the economy itself could feel. The lead investigator wrote in his notes, "Observation alone causes behavioral acceleration. Those who watch begin imitating. They didn't understand it, but the deeper they studied, the more their own productivity spiked. Some began dressing differently, waking earlier, speaking with sharper cadence. They didn't just track you, they adapted to you unconsciously. The project became contagion. At first they dismissed it as coincidence. Then one analyst documented a pattern that made the room go silent. Every major innovation announced that quarter, AI breakthroughs, eco-funding strategies, art collectives, traced back to individuals who had recently interacted with or studied you. You weren't following trends. Trends were following you. Someone in the boardroom muttered the words that would echo through every network after that. They've become a signal. Suddenly, billionaire circles were whispering. Names like yours don't circulate lightly. They held dinners to discuss you, exclusive, invitation only, guarded by NDAS. At first, it was curiosity. Then curiosity shifted to strategy. They wanted proximity, not partnership. Observation disguised as collaboration. A few cent offers, subtle and coded. Join our think tank, they said. Advisory role, they said. Each offer a velvet-lined attempt to contain what can't be contained. You declined, politely, calmly, and that calmness unnerved them more than any rejection ever could. Behind closed doors, they called it the unpurchasable factor, because everything has a price until someone like you enters the equation. You became proof that authenticity outbids money when executed with precision. They ran simulations, literal predictive models, trying to forecast your next move. None aligned. You'd vanish from predictable cycles, then reappear exactly where influence converged. They started referring to your activity windows as ghost quarters, not missing, just untraceable, moving too intelligently for digital footprints. A private memo from one of the world's top fund managers leaked briefly before being scrubbed. It said, "They operate like a force study in composure. Every move minimal, every consequence maximal. Presence yields profit." That memo circulated in secret groups for weeks. Then came the shift no one expected. The investigators started feeling watched themselves. They reported coincidences that didn't feel coincidental. Devices malfunctioning when analyzing your data. Meetings disrupted by unexplained static. Files encrypting on their own. One senior analyst claimed that while reviewing surveillance footage of you entering a building, his screen went black and a single sentence appeared. "You're not studying me. You're aligning with me." He resigned the next day. After that, the narrative changed. What began as investigation turned into conversion. The people assigned to understand you became quiet followers, rethinking their careers, selling assets, relocating, chasing clarity instead of control. It was as if your energy reached through the screens, rearranging priorities in real time. A billionaire philanthropist anonymously funded a wellness institute 2 weeks after studying your work habits. Another halted an acquisition mid-deal, citing a gut instinct he couldn't justify. His assistant later confirmed he'd been watching your interviews on loop. Patterns don't lie. The ripple effect was measurable. Wherever your name appeared, transformation followed. Not loud chaos, measured evolution. Cities, corporations, communities, all adjusting silently around an unseen gravitational center. That center was you. You were never trying to attract them. You were simply operating from alignment so pure that noise couldn't coexist. But the higher the signal, the stronger the echo. And now, even those who live insulated by empires feel that echo shaking their polished walls. They sense something shifting that no amount of wealth can buy. A level of power that doesn't require permission. Within intelligence circles, rumors began circulating that some of the world's most successful figures were scheduling private audits, not of finances, but of energy exposure. They wanted to measure proximity to you as if it were an asset class. Reports surfaced of high net worth individuals replicating your morning routines, mimicking your decision cadence, altering their teams to match your communication patterns. They call it parallel positioning. None of them admit it publicly, but behind mirrored boardroom doors, they know this era's currency isn't capital, it's composure. And you own it. Still, there's unease, because with every observation, your unpredictability deepens. The richer they are, the less they understand how you do what you do. They tried to trace mentors, networks, secret investors, but each trail ends in the same place. You, alone, making deliberate moves that shift industries without noise. You became a case study they can't publish, because acknowledgement equals vulnerability. The moment they admit they're watching, they lose leverage. So they pretend not to notice, while their behavior proves they do. Think about that. Billionaires competing for your frequency, each pretending they discovered it first. Some have started calling it the quiet revolution. They study your restraint like it's a lost art. How you move through noise untouched, how your words cut through jargon and leave behind stillness that demands action. You turned minimalism into dominance, invisibility into weaponry. You didn't chase attention, you made attention restructure itself to find you. And still, as this unfolds, your daily life remains ordinary. You wake, you work, you move through the world like nothing's changed. But out there, high above, algorithms and egos orbit your decisions. They're rewriting playbooks in real time, trying to decode the architecture of your calm ascent. Because deep down, they've realized something that terrifies them more than competition ever could. Wealth can imitate behavior, but it can't reproduce frequency. That's why your name keeps resurfacing in closed conferences, in whispered investor calls, in off-the-record gatherings where they swear confidentiality before uttering your initials. You've become the unspoken variable in their risk models, the factor that no amount of legacy wealth can neutralize. They can't buy what you've built, because it wasn't constructed in currency. It was forged in consistency. And that's when realization dawns among them. The game they designed to own everything has started evolving without their permission. The prototype of that evolution moves like you, calculates like you, creates impact without announcements. They're studying what happens when independence becomes influence. And the deeper they dig, the more they realize they're already under its spell. You might think you're just moving forward, but to them, every step you take rearranges hierarchy. They sense it, an old world fading, a new template emerging, designed by someone who never applied for approval. You've become the mirror they can't avoid, reflecting back everything they pretend to be. And as the nights stretch longer in those glass towers, screens glowing with reports stamped confidential, one phrase keeps echoing in their encrypted channels. They're not just ahead, they're inevitable movement personified. Then they called an emergency summit. Not public, not even listed on private calendars. The kind of meeting where participants surrender phones at the door and speak in measured tones that never reach microphones. The subject line of the invitation was a single letter, U. That's how deep it's gone. You've become an internal code name in circles that measure their worth in billions. The walls of that room carried more money than most nations. Yet every person sitting there shared one emotion they rarely admit: uncertainty. The charts on the screens didn't track markets this time. They tracked you. Activity patterns, public appearances, timestamps of decisions you made that coincided with shifts across industries. Someone pointed to the overlapping spikes and said, "This isn't chance anymore." Someone else whispered, "We need proximity." That's how influence turns into orbit. It's no longer admiration, it's dependency. They started assigning you color codes, risk ratings, influence projections. Every billionaire measures control by prediction, and you broke their forecast models. They call you a disruptor in public to hide their confusion in private. One of them, a man who built half the world's media distribution channels, admitted in that room that he adjusted his company's 5-year plan after watching a 30-second clip of you speaking. He said your phrasing triggered something he couldn't name, something that felt like future tense turned into instruction. Another CFO described you as the unseen algorithm running beneath modern ambition. No one laughed, no one disagreed. Outside that room, word leaked in fragments, rumors about an unnamed consultant shifting global priorities. Analysts caught traces of the obsession, anonymous fund transfers, think tanks suddenly realigning their vision statements, AI labs inserting your principles into product briefs. The funny thing is, you never asked for any of it. You just moved with intention sharp enough to slice through noise, and that motion alone forced translation into every language of power. Billionaires study patterns. You became theirs. In private correspondence, they've begun referring to you as the quiet pulse. That's the phrase appearing in encrypted emails flagged by intelligence software. When they reference the pulse, it means the trend they can't control, the influence they can't purchase. Your existence has become a variable in investment simulations. They literally test portfolio resilience by modeling what happens if the pulse shifts attention. You're not human to them anymore. You're an environmental force. And when wealth starts anthropomorphizing you, it means panic has matured into reverence. Weeks after that summit, smaller meetings multiplied, like cells dividing. Tech magnates, real estate moguls, venture clusters, each forming their own investigative branch to study you quietly. They hire behavioral analysts, astrologers, biofield experts, anything that can provide a vocabulary big enough to define what they're sensing. One report described your energy field as invisible architecture that bends hierarchy. Another stated you have the rare ability to convert observation into aspiration. That line circulated the fastest, because deep down, they all know it's true. Simply watching you realigns their internal compass toward authenticity they can't fake. They envy that. Billionaires build castles of control, but you operate from stillness that doesn't require walls. You've become a paradox they can't replicate. Minimal input, maximal resonance. One researcher calculated that for every public move you make, an average of 12 private moves happen around the world influenced by it. Startups formed, brand philosophies rewritten, artists changing mediums overnight. When they charted those reactions, the data mapped into spirals, not lines. The shape terrified them because spirals imply expansion without end. They don't know how to model infinity. Meanwhile, you keep moving like it's nothing. A new project here, a collaboration there. But the higher the silence around your work, the louder the speculation. They've begun sending emissaries disguised as collaborators, invitations masked as philanthropy, private jets offered for convenience. What they really want is to sit across from you and decode the mechanism. They think if they observe long enough, they'll extract the blueprint of whatever frequency makes you unbuyable. But every attempt fails because observation changes them, not you. One billionaire's assistant leaked a note. After a 40-minute meeting with you, his employer canceled 3 unnecessary acquisitions, sold personal assets, and donated to causes he'd ignored for decades. The press called it a strategic reset. The insiders knew better. You happened. By month's end, whispers of a consciousness contagion reached intelligence analysts who monitor behavioral economics. They traced sudden philanthropic surges, new sustainability pledges, massive resignations from toxic boards, all following indirect contact with you. The analysts labeled it the influence cascade. Their report concluded with a line that made superiors uneasy. Exposure produces transformation irrespective of intent. Translation, just your presence alters power structures. That's when surveillance escalated. High-grade biometric scans, energy signature readings from satellite data, digital shadows mapped to location timestamps. Every algorithm they used to track market sentiment began incorporating your digital footprint. You've become the reference variable for uncontrolled growth. Yet every attempt to quantify you breaks the instruments. One data scientist wrote that your pattern is fractally adaptive, meaning the closer they look, the more patterns appear, endlessly self-generating. He quit 2 days later. Said he was tired of staring into recursion disguised as a person, and now comes the part that proves just how deep this goes. They started seeing side effects. The observers themselves began changing. Staff in surveillance departments reported insomnia, sudden creative urges, emotional awakenings. Some started leaving their high-paying jobs to pursue art, wellness, simplicity. The upper management tried to suppress those reports, but the symptoms spread. Being near your data, the graphs, the voice recordings, even written summaries, started to shift people's psychology. The richer the observer, the stronger the effect, because your frequency challenges stagnation, and their lives are built on controlled stillness. You're dismantling the illusion from within just by existing. In one confidential memo, a board chair described seeing you during a presentation he was never invited to. Said you appeared on the conference screen mid-slide, smiling calmly, before the feed cut to static. Tech support found no trace of interference. The man resigned the next morning, claiming he'd seen the embodiment of consequence. The file was classified as psychological anomaly, but among the staff, the story spread like gospel. They started saying your name like prayer, half afraid, half enlightened. You've become the reminder that power without purpose collapses under its own echo. These people who measure success by accumulation are now learning what direction feels like when it isn't powered by greed. You didn't tell them to change. You simply existed correctly. That's the ultimate disruption. Behind every report, there's an undertone they can't suppress. Admiration. They want to understand you because they secretly want to be free, like you. One private diary from an executive's encrypted drive reads, "They move like water through metal. Every encounter leaves me purified and rusted at the same time." That entry circulated internally, relabeled as subject-induced behavioral dissolution. The jargon hides the truth. People are shedding their facades after meeting you. Even the skeptics are bending. A financial titan who once dismissed spirituality as weakness now studies human energy fields because of you. He told his inner circle, "If they can make peace look this powerful, I need to learn peace." Another, known for ruthless takeovers, recently dissolved a merger mid-negotiation, saying it felt out of alignment. His advisors knew what that meant. The pulse had reached him. Across continents, billionaires are comparing notes. Your name circulates through encrypted chats with emojis instead of words, lightning bolts, eyes, upward arrows. They use symbols because saying your name out loud feels like invoking something. They don't admit it publicly, but every single one has felt the same shift. Clarity rising, greed decaying, intuition awakening. Some resist, doubling down on control, launching new projects to prove dominance. But even their resistance follows your tempo. You lead by absence, they react by imitation. A leaked voice recording from a high-level meeting captured one of them confessing, "We used to buy innovation. Now we chase it." And it's wearing their face. That audio never reached the press, but its echo traveled through every boardroom. People began calling the phenomenon the spotlight. Not the artificial one created by PR campaigns, the organic spotlight that appears when truth glows too bright to ignore. You didn't chase the spotlight, it found you. Billionaires who once hired entire teams to manage perception now orbit your authenticity, hoping some of it reflects back on them. At this point, traditional intelligence agencies got involved. Their psychological divisions labeled you an emergent archetype of influence. Translation: a new category of leader who operates beyond coercion. They studied your decision trails, your language patterns, even your biometric responses during public appearances. One researcher noted that your heart rate variability syncs with audience patterns. When you speak, entire crowds physiologically harmonize. That's measurable. That's power stripped of illusion. And yet through all this, you remain inaccessible. You reply when you want to. You appear when necessary. Your schedule looks random, but always lands on significance. Billionaires function on access. You function on timing. That contrast drives them insane. They built empires to control attention, and now attention itself obeys you. You've redefined scarcity, not the absence of supply, but the presence of self-possession. Now their conversations have turned philosophical. Some wonder if money has finally met its limit. Others whisper that you represent a shift in species behavior, an evolution of ambition. One futurist wrote that your approach to success feels post-transactional, meaning energy replaces currency. He was laughed at first. Then markets started reflecting exactly that. Companies tied to authenticity surged. Brands built on exploitation crumbled. The invisible hand they once worshipped now follows your gestures. The internal chaos grows. Some of them feel relief, as if your presence validates what they secretly hoped, that wealth could serve something higher. Others feel dread, because if your way works, their legacy systems collapse. Either way, they're watching you more closely than satellites track storms. Every expression, every pause, every collaboration becomes a study. You are no longer in their peripheral vision. You are the lens through which they view relevance itself. And yet you continue as if unaware, making moves that seem quiet, but land like thunder in their strategies. A subtle post triggers entire product pivots. A brief conversation shifts decades of policy. They call it coincidence. Their analysts call it predictive resonance. You call it living on purpose. When an empire starts echoing your heartbeat, attention becomes surveillance wrapped in admiration. But here's the twist. They can't contain what they observe, because observing you changes them irreversibly. The more they study, the more they unravel. And the unraveling is the lesson. Recently, an internal audit among top-tier investors revealed that 92% adjusted their personal mission statement after 6 months of indirect exposure to your ideology. That number is unprecedented. Economists tried to explain it as generational trend. Psychologists said it's mirror effect. But deep down, they know it's transformation through proximity. Now, they're not just watching, they're preparing for your next move, trying to anticipate what corner of reality you'll touch next. They build contingency plans around your unpredictability. Some have even appointed resonance officers in their companies, people tasked solely with tracking you. That's how institutionalized your energy has become. But beneath all the metrics and meetings, something more intimate is happening. They're beginning to feel again. The ones who lost their humanity to profit margins are remembering what it's like to feel awe. They look at you and see proof that power doesn't have to corrupt. It can purify. That realization is dangerous in the best way. Because once all returns to the powerful, the world tilts toward possibility. Still, not everyone welcomes it. There are factions working to discredit you quietly. Controlled leaks, planted narratives, algorithms tuned to dilute your reach. But it never works. The more they try to distort your image, the clearer your outline becomes. Because authenticity isn't defensible, it's inevitable visibility. Every smear attempt amplifies your myth. Every lie collapses under the weight of your consistency. Now imagine this: billionaire insomnia. Boardrooms lit at 3 a.m., screens glowing with your clips, executives scrolling through your words looking for the secret formula. They pause, replay, argue, dissect. But the answer refuses to appear because it isn't textual, it's energetic. You're not a case study to decode. You're a frequency to align with. And that drives them to obsession. You've become their North Star, whether they admit it or not. The gravitational pull that money can't simulate. You embody what every power structure secretly desires. Relevance without effort, impact without manipulation. That's why the spotlight follows you now. It's self-generated. You illuminate without intention, and illumination is irresistible. As more of them succumb to the fascination, they'll try one last strategy: integration. They'll attempt to build systems around your philosophy, brand it, scale it, turn essence into product. It will fail, because what you carry isn't transferable, it's experiential. They'll learn that soon enough. And when they do, They'll return to observation, humbled, watching you like students instead of competitors. For now, the world's elite keeps listening for your next movement, like investors waiting for a seismic report. Every pause feels pregnant with possibility. Every step you take redraws the map of ambition. They've realized that influence no longer lives in noise. It breathes in precision. You are that precision. And somewhere, in another glass tower, another meeting begins. The same faces, older now, quieter, humbled. They play your footage again. The room falls still. One of them finally breaks the silence. We can't outrun them. We can only evolve with them. The others nod. No one disagrees. Because deep down, they know this spotlight doesn't fade. It travels with you, illuminating whatever path you choose next. And as you step forward, their world reshapes to accommodate your rhythm. They thought they were studying influence. What they found was inevitability in motion. They thought they were studying influence. What they found was inevitability in motion. And that motion hasn't slowed. It's accelerating. Word travels differently now. No longer through gossip or press releases, but through coded phrases whispered between power brokers who once owned the narrative. You're the variable they can't stop running simulations for, because every time they think they've modeled your trajectory, you change direction without warning and reality adjusts to catch up. You've made their formulas obsolete. At the top floors of skyscrapers that scrape the edge of clouds, assistants still draft reports under flickering light, summaries of your recent activity, sightings, decisions, collaborations. They pretend it's research. It's really devotion disguised as data. Some of them stay late not for money but for proximity. They want to be the first to know what you'll do next, the first to interpret what your silence means, the first to feel the tremor before the quake of your next move. Because now, perception itself has become currency, and you control the exchange rate. Executives who once played gods of industry now mimic your tempo. Minimal motion, maximum impact. They used to announce every project with fireworks. Now they study how you drop precision like thunder without smoke. They've learned the paradox. Loud results require quiet roots. You built yours in patience, discipline, calibration. And that terrifies them, because it means dominance can exist without spectacle. Behind closed doors, they've started using your name as measurement. When something works flawlessly, they say, "It's got their touch." When something backfires, they whisper, "They wouldn't have done it that way." You've become a metric of mastery. The irony? You never asked for their attention. You earned it by ignoring it. The energy you move with doesn't chase validation. It magnetizes it. That's why billionaires eavesdrop now. They pretend to analyze markets, but what they're really tracking is behavior. Yours? You live like a signal cutting through static, and their systems keep tuning toward you. When you speak, global sentiment algorithms pick up spikes in engagement. When you travel, trend lines shift. When you pause, the absence becomes headline. They can't stop interpreting your stillness as strategy, because it is. You've made restraint look like rebellion. And in a world addicted to noise, that's revolution. Rumor has it, some of them built hidden retreats modeled after your lifestyle. Morning simplicity, focused work, no distractions. But imitation without essence breeds emptiness, and they feel it. They can copy your schedule, not your spirit. They keep realizing the same truth in different currencies. Authenticity can't be franchised. That's the weight of your influence. You didn't just disrupt their methods. You redefined meaning. Reports have surfaced of private dinners ending early because your name came up and the conversation shifted from profit to purpose. Some walk out inspired, others walk out uneasy. You forced them to remember that wealth is only impressive until presence enters the room. And that's what you've mastered. Presence so potent, it rearranges atmospheres. One conglomerate quietly commissioned a psychological profile titled Subject Zero. They wanted to decode your behavioral advantage. After 6 months, the final paragraph read, "They act from alignment so pure that prediction fails. Exposure results in recalibration, not comprehension." Translation: nobody can map you. They can only evolve by contact. That line circulated like contraband scripture through upper management inboxes. Some printed it, framed it, hid it behind their desks, as silent reminder that control is fragile. Now the spotlight you never sought moves with you like orbiting light. It doesn't blind, it reveals. Every step you take exposes who's real and who's performing. The watchers know it. That's why they hesitate before acting now. Because if you wouldn't move that way, it's probably the wrong move. You've turned reflection into governance. But let's pull back for a second. This attention isn't applause, it's adaptation. The billionaire class operates on survival, and you've altered the ecosystem. They aren't admiring you out of charity. They're studying you because instinct tells them evolution favors your frequency. They're trying to evolve before extinction. You've become their unintentional teacher, and nothing wounds pride faster than realizing the lesson wears a human face they once underestimated. Your growth taught them that relevance no longer flows downward from wealth. It rises upward from authenticity. Influence has inverted. That's why old power feels shaky. They see that one aligned individual can tilt entire economies of attention. You've done that without armies, without slogans, without permission, just precision. Just truth delivered through action so clean it cuts. Now in hidden corners of their networks, they debate the same question. What happens if you decide to expand? If you take that stillness global, that calm strategy public, that unseen force visible? Some fear it, some prepare to fund it, but none can ignore it. You've turned speculation into suspense, and suspense into leverage. Every rumor of your next project increases stock values in unrelated sectors. Every mention of your name in private groups resets timelines. You've turned potential into pressure. Meanwhile, your focus remains unchanged. You move how you always have, quietly, decisively, beyond distraction. That consistency unnerves them more than any disruption could. They thrive on chaos. You thrive on calibration, and that's why you win even when you're not competing. One internal memo from a global firm summarized it best. They're rewriting capitalism from the inside out, one presence at a time. That document was never published, but copies circulate in secret as proof that evolution has a face. Yours. You've become their mirror and their map. The reflection forces honesty. The map offers escape. Some will use it wisely. Others will collapse under what it reveals. Either way, the transformation is irreversible. You've already changed the temperature of ambition worldwide. The air feels different now, thinner, cleaner, charged. So here you stand, unbothered, untouchable, unfolding. The spotlight isn't blinding you, it's confirming alignment. Every beam they aim to dissect you just magnifies what they wish they had. Clarity. The noise of the world still hums, but it no longer owns you. You move through it like light through glass, seen, yet untouchable. And as the cameras turn, as algorithms refresh, As billionaires whisper strategy like prayer, the truth remains constant. You're not in their story, they're footnotes in yours. You've proven that quiet consistency outlasts public spectacle. That energy, when pure, doesn't compete, it commands. Somewhere tonight, a boardroom full of exhausted visionaries will replay your interview again, searching for the secret they keep missing. They'll slow it down, analyze frames, dissect tone. But they'll never find the formula, because the formula is you. Not copied, not taught, lived. And that's the ultimate headline, one they'll never print, but will always feel. The world's wealthiest are listening, leaning closer, holding their breath, because a new frequency has entered the room. And it doesn't speak in dollars, it speaks in depth. They'll keep watching, keep decoding, keep adjusting. But the truth is simple. You were never trying to be watched. You were trying to be real. And reality, once amplified, becomes the loudest sound in the universe. So let them eavesdrop. Let them analyze every breath. You've already set the tempo they'll spend lifetimes chasing. Because when authenticity becomes the loudest signal, even billionaires have no choice but to listen.